In this episode, we explore a haunting story from America's largest retirement community. A young woman's life was tragically cut short due to the disturbing fixation of her older partner. Emily Harrington, a 22-year-old elementary school teacher in Sumter County, Florida, was dedicated to her job at a small local school. Emily was known for her kindness and dedication. She always went above and beyond for her students, creating a vibrant classroom filled with engaging materials. She frequently stayed late to grade papers and prepare lessons, driven by a genuine passion for making a positive impact on her students' lives. Despite her commitment, Emily faced financial difficulties with her yearly salary of only $19,000. The rising costs of rent, groceries, and gas made it challenging for her to cover basic expenses and manage her finances effectively. Emily dreamed of providing more for her students and improving her own situation, but financial stress was a constant burden. To ease this pressure, she entered into relationships with older, affluent men who offered financial support in exchange for her companionship. This brought her to the Villages, the largest retirement community in the U.S., known for its open lifestyle. There, she met Hal Davenport, a 68-year-old retired businessman. Hal was generous, frequently giving Emily expensive gifts and dining with her at upscale restaurants. For Emily, this relationship was a means to support herself while continuing to focus on her teaching career. Emily had a strong bond with her father, Robert Harrington, especially after her mother passed away. Robert was proud of Emily's achievements, but was concerned about her living conditions and the pressures she was under. While he knew she was facing difficulties, he wasn't fully aware of the extent of her struggles. Emily kept her arrangement with her sugar daddy a secret from her father, not wanting to cause him distress. By March 2022, she was dedicated to her work and future. She was busy preparing for the upcoming school year and had plans to attend a conference in Orlando to enhance her skills in engaging students in science. Emily aspired to become a prominent educator, inspiring both teachers and students. However, behind her optimistic facade, she was grappling with the complications of her secret arrangement, which would soon lead to tragic outcomes. On the morning of March 12, 2022, around 7:30 a.m., Jasper Rivera, a maintenance worker at the U-Haul storage facility on County Road 466, just outside the Villages, Florida, began his routine inspections. The sun had just risen, casting a soft light over the rows of orange and white storage units. As Jasper walked down the aisles, he spotted something unusual near one of the units, a pile of what appeared to be discarded clothing. Curious, he approached the pile, but as he drew closer, the sight that met his eyes left him frozen in shock. It wasn't just a pile of clothes. It was the body of a young woman, partially dressed and lying on the cold, rough ground. Her face was turned away, and she was unresponsive. Jasper's heart pounded as he grasped the gravity of his discovery. Trembling, he pulled out his smartphone and dialed 911. When the operator answered, he struggled to find the right words to explain the horrifying scene he had just encountered. "I found a body," he finally managed to say, his voice wavering. The operator calmly instructed him to stay on the line and provide details about the location while dispatching emergency services. Jasper followed her guidance, struggling to remain composed as the shock of his discovery overwhelmed him. Within minutes, police officers from the Sumter County Sheriff's Office arrived at the U-Haul facility. By then, a few early morning customers had arrived and noticed the flashing lights of the patrol cars. The officers swiftly secured the area around the body with yellow crime scene tape, directing onlookers to keep their distance. The victim was later identified as 22-year-old Emily Harrington, an elementary school teacher. Her body exhibited signs of blunt force trauma to the head, and drag marks on the ground indicated she had been moved to this location after her death. Emily was found wearing only her underwear, raising immediate concerns about the circumstances surrounding her death. Police observed the absence of blood at the scene, confirming that Emily had likely been killed elsewhere. Jasper Rivera remained at the scene, visibly shaken but cooperative. He spoke to the officers about his discovery, still grappling with the shock of what he had found. The discovery of Emily Harrington's body marked the start of a challenging and troubling investigation. On March 12, 2022, shortly after her body was found at the U-Haul storage facility on County Road 466, the Sumter County Sheriff's Office began a thorough investigation. Detective Ashley Collins, known for her expertise in handling complex cases, arrived on the scene with her partner, Officer Devin Stevens. The two were well regarded for their effective collaboration, frequently tackling intricate cases in the rapidly expanding community of the Villages. The scene at the U-Haul facility was somber. Emily's body was found on the ground, partially clothed, with evident signs of blunt force trauma to her head. The area was unnervingly quiet, with only the distant hum of early morning traffic. The police swiftly set up yellow crime scene tape to keep curious onlookers and reporters away. Detective Collins closely examined the body, observing the absence of blood at the scene, which indicated that Emily had probably been killed elsewhere and then moved. The detectives prioritized checking the nearby security cameras, hoping to identify who had brought Emily to the secluded location. Detective Collins instructed Officer Stevens to retrieve the footage from the facility's office, which had several cameras monitoring the entrance and storage unit rows. The detectives planned to review the footage later at the station, searching for any suspicious vehicles or individuals who might have been near the scene around the time of the murder. Meanwhile, they observed drag marks on the gravel near Emily's body, indicating she had been pulled from a vehicle and left at the location. This crucial evidence suggested a deliberate effort to conceal the body and possibly delay its discovery. Detective Collins directed the forensic team to photograph the drag marks and collect any fibers or debris that might have come from the suspect's clothing or vehicle. Dr. Grace Kwok and her team, arriving shortly after, began processing the scene. They utilized advanced tools, including luminol, to detect any hidden blood traces, despite the scene appearing clean. The absence of visible blood supported the detectives' theory that Emily had been killed elsewhere, making it essential to determine where the initial crime occurred. While the forensic team continued their work, Detective Collins interviewed Jasper Rivera, the maintenance worker who had discovered the body. Though still visibly shaken, Jasper gave a clear and detailed account of his findings. Jasper described how he initially mistook the body for a pile of clothes until he got closer. His account was crucial in helping the detectives establish a timeline and determine when the body had been left at the facility. Despite a meticulous and thorough investigation at the crime scene, the detectives were left with more questions than answers. The detectives understood that solving Emily's murder depended on discovering where she had been killed and who had a motive for such violence. The first person of interest was Harold Hall Davenport, a 68-year-old widower and retired businessman living in the Villages. Known for his wealth and charm, Hall was a prominent figure in the community. Originally from Zanesville, Ohio, Harold Hall Davenport had built a successful career in real estate and was now enjoying a comfortable retirement in Florida's largest retirement community. He and Emily Harrington had met through an arrangement where Emily sought financial support from older, wealthy men. Their relationship started with Hall giving Emily money and gifts in exchange for sex and companionship. Over time, Hall grew increasingly attached to Emily, seeing her as more than just a companion. This attachment soon turned into possessiveness, a pattern that had caused issues in his previous relationships. When police interviewed Hall on March 13, 2022, a day after Emily's body was discovered, he seemed cooperative but was visibly nervous. Hall confirmed his relationship with Emily and admitted that he had last seen her 2 days before her death. He said they had spent the evening at his home, watching old movies on Turner Classic Movies and having dinner from Outback Steakhouse, one of his favorites. Hall maintained that their relationship was entirely consensual and insisted he had no motive to harm her. Despite his calm demeanor, detectives observed inconsistencies in Hall's account. When questioned about his whereabouts on the night of Emily's death, he hesitated and stumbled over his words. Eventually, he claimed he had been home alone, providing this as his alibi. The detectives found it suspicious that Hall couldn't provide any witnesses or details to support his alibi. As the questioning continued, his nervousness increased, and he showed signs of agitation, raising his voice when pressed about his relationship with Emily. Additionally, the detectives discovered that Hall had a history of controlling behavior. His past relationships had ended poorly, often because of his possessiveness. Police also uncovered that his wife in Ohio had died in what was described as a suicide, driving her car into a lake shortly after requesting a divorce. This information suggested a pattern of behavior that could indicate a potential for acting out of jealousy or fear of losing control. As the investigation advanced, Hall remained a primary suspect. The police concentrated on gathering evidence to either confirm or rule out his involvement in Emily's death. They obtained a warrant to search Hall's home, seeking signs of his potential involvement, traces of blood, any of Emily's belongings, or anything else that might connect Hall to the murder. Hall Davenport's initial calmness started to falter under the investigation's pressure. However, the detectives knew they needed more than mere suspicion to build a strong case against him. The second person of interest was Mike Andrews, a 21-year-old part-time server at Applebee's and a community college student in Leesburg. Mike had been dating Emily Harrington for about a year. Although their relationship had its challenges, they were generally considered a happy couple. Mike was outgoing, ambitious, and well-liked, often dreaming of transferring to a 4-year university to study business. Despite his youthful energy, Mike was deeply protective of Emily and was unaware of her involvement with Hall Davenport or her sugar daddy arrangement. On March 14, 2022, 2 days after Emily's body was discovered, the police brought Mike in for questioning. When the detectives asked about his relationship with Emily, Mike described her as caring, intelligent, and always supportive of his goals. He mentioned they had been planning a weekend trip to Orlando to visit Universal Studios. Mike appeared genuinely shocked upon learning of Emily's death, his voice trembling as he questioned how such a tragedy could have occurred. However, when the detectives inquired about Emily's recent behavior, he revealed something that raised their suspicions. Mike mentioned that a few weeks before her death, he had tested positive for an STD, which he believed he had contracted from Emily. This revelation had caused tension between Mike and Emily. Although they had discussed it, Mike admitted that he felt hurt and confused. He had confronted Emily, who reassured him that it was probably a misunderstanding, and they had attempted to move past it. Throughout the interrogation, Mike's emotions fluctuated between sadness and anger. Mike clearly showed grief over Emily's loss, but became defensive when detectives inquired about her financial struggles or other relationships. He denied knowing anything about Emily's arrangement with Hall Davenport, insisting that had he been aware, he would have ended the relationship. While the detectives noted his frustration, there was no concrete evidence connecting him to the murder. Mike also provided an alibi for the night of Emily's death, claiming he had worked a late shift at Applebee's and then had a study session at home. The detectives verified his work schedule, confirming he had clocked out at 11 p.m. His alibi was further supported by a neighbor who saw him arrive home shortly after midnight. Despite the possible motive related to the STD, his alibi and emotional response made it challenging for the detectives to pinpoint him as the murderer. The detectives kept Mike under close watch, but like with Hall Davenport, they knew they needed more concrete evidence before making any conclusions. Their attention then turned to Robert Harrington, Emily's 47-year-old father. Robert was a dedicated man who had raised Emily alone after his wife passed away when Emily was a teenager. Robert was widely recognized as a devoted father who took great pride in Emily's accomplishments. However, the recent discovery of a positive pregnancy test in her apartment, along with her involvement with older men, had left him deeply worried and unsettled. On March 15, 2022, 3 days after Emily's body was found, Robert was brought in for questioning. The detectives aimed to understand the nature of Robert's relationship with Emily leading up to her death, given their close bond. During the interview, Robert was visibly distraught, with red eyes from lack of sleep. He spoke fondly of Emily, describing her as a bright and kind-hearted young woman deeply dedicated to her students. Robert mentioned Emily's dream of one day starting a family and expressed his devastation that she would never have the chance. When the detectives inquired about the pregnancy test found in Emily's apartment, Robert admitted he had recently discovered it during a visit. He was shocked and uncertain about how to address the issue with his daughter. Robert explained that he had attempted to discuss the pregnancy test with Emily, but she had seemed distant and dismissed his concerns. He was unaware of who the father might be and was troubled by the idea of Emily being involved with an older man like Hal Davenport. Despite his evident distress, the detectives questioned Robert about his whereabouts on the night of Emily's death. Robert said he had been at home that night, watching TV and working on a project for his job as an electrician. Living alone, he had no one to confirm his alibi. The detectives observed that he became increasingly agitated during the questioning, his hands trembling as he tried to articulate his worries about Emily's recent behavior. Robert's love for his daughter was clear, but the detectives had to consider the possibility that he might have acted out of anger or fear after learning about her secret life. They also examined whether his distress over the pregnancy and Emily's involvement with multiple men could have led him to commit a crime. However, without concrete evidence, it was challenging to determine if his emotional state had driven him to violence. The detectives remained cautious, acknowledging Robert's genuine grief but keeping him on their list of potential suspects. As with the other individuals they had interviewed, they required more evidence to either exclude him or confirm their suspicions. On March 18, 2022, 5 days after Emily Harrington's body was discovered, a significant breakthrough in the case occurred. On a warm afternoon in the Villages, with temperatures around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, Detective Ashley Collins received a call from the forensic lab. The team had finished analyzing the security footage from the U-Haul storage facility and additional evidence from the scene. The results included an unexpected lead, a partial license plate number from a vehicle that had entered the facility late on the night of March 11th. The footage captured a dark-colored sedan entering the facility around 11:45 p.m., just hours before Emily's body was discovered. The car's behavior was suspicious. It didn't park near any storage units and stayed only a few minutes before swiftly leaving the facility. The partial plate number, along with the vehicle's make and model, a 2004 Honda Civic, provided the detectives with a crucial lead. Detective Collins and Officer Devin Stevens quickly cross-referenced the details with the Department of Motor Vehicles database. Their search yielded an unexpected match. The car was registered to Hal Davenport. This discovery intensified the growing suspicions around Hal Davenport, who had been cooperative but evasive during earlier interviews. The detectives recognized that this evidence might be crucial in connecting Hal directly to the crime. With this new lead, they obtained a warrant to search both Hal's home and his car. On the morning of March 19, 2022, a team of officers arrived at Hal Davenport's residence in the Villages. The search was extensive, with detectives examining Hal's personal belongings, electronic devices, and the dark-colored sedan parked in his driveway. Inside the car, they discovered fibers matching the fabric of Emily's clothing and traces of soil consistent with the area near the U-Haul facility. The detectives recognized they were nearing the truth. The forensic evidence, security footage, and Hal Davenport's erratic behavior all pointed to him as the prime suspect. With the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, the investigation was quickly approaching its conclusion. On the morning of March 20, 2022, the Sumter County Sheriff's Office took a decisive step. Armed with the evidence they had collected, Detectives Ashley Collins and Devin Stevens went to Hal Davenport's home in the Villages. It was a quiet Sunday, with many residents either enjoying breakfast at local spots like Perkins and Culver's or taking morning walks along the golf courses. For Hal Davenport, however, this day would be anything but ordinary. When the detectives knocked on his door, their presence marked a turning point in the investigation. Hal, upon opening the door, appeared surprised but not entirely shocked. In the days leading up to this moment, the pressure had been mounting, and it seemed Hal had anticipated this confrontation. Detective Collins informed him that there was enough evidence to arrest him for Emily Harrington's murder. Hal's face went pale, and he sank into a chair, muttering that it had all been a mistake. Hal confessed that on the night of March 11th, he had gone to confront Emily after misinterpreting a document on her computer titled PBFILE Kids. His severe dyslexia led him to believe it indicated she was abusing children. In a fit of rage and confusion, he had struck Emily with a heavy object. Hal explained that he never intended to kill Emily. When she fell unconscious, he panicked. In his frantic state, he decided to move her body, hoping to delay its discovery and buy himself time to figure out his next steps. He drove to the U-Haul storage facility in the middle of the night, thinking the isolated location would keep her body hidden long enough for him to come up with a plan. As the detectives put Hal in handcuffs, his reaction changed from shock to resignation. He offered no resistance and quietly cooperated as they escorted him to the patrol car. The neighborhood, known for its relaxed atmosphere and retirees, was abuzz with the news of his arrest. Neighbors watched from their windows, some in disbelief that the friendly old man they knew could be involved in such a crime. Later that day, Emily's family was informed of the arrest. Her father, Robert Harrington, was heartbroken but relieved that the person responsible for his daughter's death had been apprehended. Robert struggled to understand how someone who had seemed so generous and caring could commit such a terrible act. The arrest of Hal Davenport marked a crucial turning point in the case, providing a measure of closure to a community shaken by the tragedy. Yet it also left lingering questions about the complexities of Hal's mind and the tragic misunderstanding that led to Emily's death. The trial of Hal Davenport began on April 15, 2022, at the Sumter County Courthouse, a modern building in the heart of the Villages. The courtroom was packed with local residents, many of whom had closely followed the case through news reports on WFTV and other local stations. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, filled with both curiosity and sorrow. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Laura Reed, argued that Hal Davenport's actions stemmed from a reckless and dangerous mindset. Known for her firm but fair approach, Reed presented the case clearly and effectively. Reed presented evidence illustrating how Hal's dyslexia had caused a tragic misunderstanding, but she made it clear that this did not excuse the violence. She detailed how Hal's confrontation with Emily had escalated into a deadly encounter, resulting in her brutal death. Reed depicted Emily as a devoted teacher with a promising future, emphasizing the stark contrast between her vibrant life and the tragic end she faced due to Hal's actions. In response, Hal's defense attorney, Morgan, took a different approach. Morgan, a respected lawyer known for his skillful arguments, contended that Hal's dyslexia had severely impaired his judgment. He presented evidence indicating that Hal had genuinely misinterpreted the document on Emily's computer. Morgan argued that Hal's dyslexia led him to mistakenly believe Emily was involved in something sinister. He asserted that Hal's actions were not premeditated, but were instead a result of a sudden lapse in judgment caused by his frustration with his disability. Throughout the trial, Emily's family, including her father, Robert Harrington, attended, watching the proceedings closely from the courtroom. The trial was emotionally charged, with Emily's family visibly distressed as they listened to the details of her final moments. They frequently held hands and wiped away tears throughout the proceedings. After several days of testimony and closing arguments, the jury began their deliberations. On April 21, 2022, they reached a verdict. Hal Davenport was found guilty of manslaughter. The jury determined that although he had not intended to kill Emily, his reckless behavior had directly caused her death. This verdict reflected an acknowledgement of Hal's serious misjudgment while recognizing that there was no premeditated intent to kill. On April 28, 2022, Hal Davenport was sentenced to 36 months in prison. Reactions to the sentencing were mixed. Some felt the term was too lenient considering the severity of the crime, while others thought it was fair given Hal's age and his severe dyslexia. Emily's family was disappointed with the verdict, but took some comfort in the fact that justice had been served, even if it wasn't as severe as they had hoped. The conclusion of Hal Davenport's trial marked a somber end to a tragic chapter for Emily's loved ones and the community of the Villages. After his sentencing in April 2022, life in the Villages began to slowly return to normal. Emily's family faced a long and difficult journey to healing. Her father, Robert Harrington, remained in the home he had shared with Emily, surrounded by reminders of her. The walls were adorned with her photos, and her belongings were still present, each a poignant reminder of the daughter he had lost. Robert, deeply affected by Emily's death, sought counseling to manage his grief. He channeled his pain into advocacy, helping other victims' families through similar hardships. Meanwhile, Hal Davenport served his 36-month sentence in a state prison, facing the consequences of his actions while the community continued to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy. At 68, Hal Davenport faced significant challenges in prison. The strict routines and harsh environment contrasted sharply with his previous comfortable life in the Villages. His health deteriorated over time, exacerbated by the isolation and difficulties of adapting to the prison system. Hal Davenport's family struggled to reconcile their image of him with his crime. Meanwhile, the Villages gradually returned to its daily routines, but the memory of Emily Harrington lingered. Her tragic story became a somber reminder of life's fragility and the profound impact of such events on an entire community.